We have a real treasure with us tonight. I don't know how many of you have bought Jim Stovall's books, seen his movies as they are continuing to be produced. He's a remarkable man, a business investor. He's just got a lot of skills, a lot of gifts. Yes, he does have an impairment. He is blind. And I did tell him to tell you all that he went blind at 20 because that's what I said today in my sermon. It's actually 29, but he can say whatever he wants to say in a few minutes. But he's a terrific man. I was talking to Steve Wright earlier today as Steve gave Jim a tour of our high school, Will Rogers High School, and found out who this man was. And Steve's observation was that, you know, it's possible to have vision, but to have sight, but have no vision. And this man has vision. And he's able to see things and pull things into reality. And I just feel really blessed that he is going to be with us. He's donated his time tonight. We're going to be having an opportunity, if you would like. He's going to sign books for $20, and I think maybe the CDs might be over there as well. But those are going to be available, signed copies. All of the proceeds will go to support scholarships for Oral Roberts University students. And so that's where all this money is going tonight. He has helped over 500 students at Oral Roberts University, which is where I met my wife. And so this is a great institution here. So I don't know about you, but I am so pleased to be able to introduce to you Jim Stovall. Jim, come and speak to us.
Thank you. And good evening to you. Oh, you got a blind guy up here. If I can't hear you, I go home. Last chance. Good evening to you. There you go. Thank you. It's great to be here. Each and every time I stand up in front of an audience like this somewhere in the world to share for a few minutes about some things in this life I believe to be important. Every time I do this, I'm always reminded of that time in my life when this was not possible. It was a little over 30 years ago. That morning I woke up, I instantly realized I had lost the remainder of my sight, and I began learning how to live my life as a blind person. And the thoughts and the doubts and the fears that came over me that morning, those 3 decades ago, would be impossible to describe to you. I was 29 years old. I had never met a blind person in my life, and I didn't have a clue what I was going to do with the rest of my days here on earth. In fact, the only plan I could come up with that day involved moving into this little 9 by 12 foot room in the back of my house. And in my little room there, I gathered my radio and my telephone and my tape recorder. And that was my whole world 30 years ago. The thought of traveling millions of miles and speaking to millions of people in arena events, the thought of running a television network with over 1,000 stations, the thought of writing 40 books and having 8 of them now made into movies, the thought of writing a weekly syndicated column read by 3 million people each week on 4 continents, or the thought of being here tonight with you in my hometown would have seemed like going to the moon to me. I couldn't imagine. So I sat in my little 9 by 12 foot self-imposed prison day after day after day, getting more and more depressed and more discouraged. And I'm quite certain I would still be there tonight, except for one thing, and that is the fact that I literally ached for people like you to come and talk to. So I want you to know what a thrill it is for me to be here and how much it means to me that you're sitting there. So thank you for this evening. Now, I have to warn you, we've been doing a lot of these arena events. In fact, I leave Wednesday for one in Austin, Texas, where I will be speaking to 10,000 of my close personal friends in the arena down there. And when you do those, they have you on this giant stage. It's 80 feet wide, 40 feet deep, 12 feet high, and they have you taped down to the floor. You can only move so far because the vast majority of all those thousands of people are watching you on these giant screens. Sometimes I wonder why I even leave Tulsa if everybody's going to watch me on a screen anyway. But they have me wired down so I can't go anywhere. Well, tonight I am wireless, and I got to warn you, you got a blind guy up here, and on a bad day, I can wipe out 2 or 3 rows here. So you want to be very, very careful. I have it on good authority from a noted theologian who shall remain nameless. If you die, go to heaven, approach St. Peter there at the pearly gates. And he says, what happened to you? If you got run over by a blind Olympic weightlifting champion, I'm not sure you get in. So let's all be very cautious tonight. When you live your life like I do as a blind person, and some of the most talented and gifted people in our field of business, entrepreneurship, media, some of the best people are willing to dedicate their lives, and in my case, they dedicate their eyes to making it possible for you to do what you do. You take every opportunity, including ones like this, to simply say thank you. Missy Brigham is a great friend, a tremendous professional, an entrepreneur in her own right, a great businesswoman. She helps me get from here to there. We've just started a new project called the Stovall Center for Entrepreneurship at ORU, where people will be able to get an undergrad and a graduate degree in entrepreneurship and take the gift of free enterprise around the world. And Missy is a great help in that and a real leader in everything we do and makes it possible for me to get from there to here. So would you please help welcome my friend and colleague, Missy Brigham, over there. I want to thank Tom Harrison, Stephanie, all the staff, all the volunteers that made tonight possible. You know, events like this just don't happen. So would you please also thank them for me right now? So if tonight goes well, you will thank them later. If it doesn't, you will blame my old dear friend, Mark Wackenhuth. Because, yes, yeah, you've heard of him. There went the applause right there. No, Mark asked me, several months ago, he called and said, I'd like to, my pastor would like to meet you, can we have lunch? Well, I thought, I need to meet anybody that's in charge of Mark's spiritual guidance. That's somebody you want to get to know right there. So we met, and this happened. I knew Mark. We went to high school together. We played ball together. Mark graduated in the half of our class that made the upper half possible. Now, it's not my intention to embarrass Mark tonight, but that may happen. I'm willing to risk it. Mark's the kind of guy that wakes up every morning, reads the obituaries, and wonders why people die in alphabetical order. Of course, Mark's getting a little older now, and the other day he went to the doctor, and things aren't working as good as they used to work. And he said, Doc, I'm having trouble hearing out of my right ear, and I'm having a problem. And the doctor looked in there with his little instrument and said, well, Mark, I can solve your problem. You've got a suppository stuck in your ear. And Mark said, well, now you've solved 2 problems. I know where my hearing aid is. So, okay, enough of making fun of Mark. See, Mark is a business leader, a guy in the insurance business, does his adjusting and all the things he does in the firm his father started, a great guy in your church. But I'm going to tell you something about Mark you don't know here tonight. I'm going to reveal this. Mark is a constitutional expert. See, a lot of people don't know that. People all over Washington, they call Mark for advice because he's a constitutional scholar. It's what he is. And I know this because over the last few years, I've become one of the highest paid arena speakers in America. But Mark, he believes in free speech. And I know this because every so often, Mark will call me and get me to come out and make a free speech. So I know he believes in this, and he's gotten this from his constitutional expertise. You know, every time I get up to do this, I'm always reminded of the first time I went out to make a speech after losing my sight. It's one of those experiences we all have that kind of keep us humble, if you know what I mean. And we had just started the Narrative Television Network, and we make movies and television accessible for 13 million blind and visually impaired people around the country and millions more around the world. And things were going really, really good, and we got an Emmy Award, and it was growing very quickly. And then something happened to me that happens to a lot of us in business or in our daily life in general. Sooner or later, one morning, no matter how good things are going, sooner or later, one morning you wake up and you realize, I don't have a clue what I'm doing here. Now, if it hasn't already occurred to you that you don't have a clue what you're doing, it's probably occurred to the people around you that you don't have a clue what you're doing. Well, one morning I woke up and I realized there's probably no one less qualified to run this television network than me, this blind guy from Oklahoma. And that really bothered me. So I got on a plane and I flew out to LA and I hired a media industry consultant because I felt like I needed a consultant. This should be avoided whenever possible. But I was so paranoid about it, I hired not one but two consultants to come to Tulsa, Oklahoma, which you do know is the entertainment capital of the world. And I paid them an extraordinary amount of money to come out here and tell us how to run this network we were already running quite successfully. Well, they wandered around our offices and studios over there on South Memorial and pretty much annoyed everyone in the building. And then they came into my office for the report. Consultants are really big on reports. And they said, Jim, you're kind of new to the television industry, but as the founder and president of this network and as the host of some of our shows on air, you've got to get out and meet all our station managers all across the country. You know, you got to go schmooze these people, is what they called it. I said, Jim, you got to schmooze these people. I didn't know what they were talking about. I said, you know, you may schmooze people out in LA, get away with it, but, you know, you start schmoozing people here in Oklahoma, you can get in trouble in here. This ain't the left coast here, if you know what I'm saying. Well, they said, we want you to go to all these different towns and cities. Well, like I said, we had over 1,000 of them. I was just a little ways out of that 9 by 12 foot room I told you about. I could kind of stumble out of my house, fall into the back of the car, ride to the office and stumble around there all day. But when they told me they wanted me to go to 1,000 different towns and cities and meet all these station managers, I just said, guys, that ain't gonna happen. You're getting paid way too much money, you're annoying everybody, come up with something better than that. Well, a couple days later, they came back and they said, Jim, we have developed a plan B. I said, well, tell me about the plan B. They said, well, based on your success in business and being an Olympic weightlifting champion and your books, you know, Jim, we believe we could book you into arenas and convention centers as some kind of inspirational, motivational speaker, and then invite all of our people in on kind of a regional basis to meet you. And that way, Jim, we could kill two birds with one stone. Now, I never was totally sure why these guys from LA like to kill birds with stones, but apparently it's a big thing. In fact, remember, next time you're out on the left coast, the more birds you can kill with the fewer stones, the better they like it. Well, that's when I asked the question that gets us all in trouble here in the new millennium, in the 21st century. I said, when would I have to start? And they said, Jim, they book these big arena events at least 6 months in advance, so you wouldn't have to do anything for 6 months. Well, I suspect your schedule's a lot like mine. I don't know what I'm doing this evening after the program, so I'll agree to anything 6 months from now. In fact, if Asbury, if you're getting up a group to swim the English Channel or climb Mount Everest after the first of the year or something, go ahead and sign me up. I'll agree to anything 6 months from now. So I said, okay, I'll do it. Get out of here. Leave me alone. Well, what seemed like a few days, certainly no more than a few weeks later, they come back down the hall to my office and say, Jim, it's time to go. Like one of those bad prison death row movies, you know? blind man walking or something there. They said, Jim, it's time to go. And I said, go where? And they said, Jim, it's time for you to make one of those speeches you promised us you'd make. And I said, you clowns told me I had 6 months. And they said, Jim, trust us, it's been a full 6 months. You see, they always lie to the blind guy. And I know they lie to the blind guy. I just like to let them know that I know they lie to the blind guy. And I said, okay, where we go? And they said, Jim, we have booked you into the Anaheim Coliseum where you will be the motivational speaker for 14,000 state government workers. That has worked in all 50 states. Now, if anybody here tonight works for the state government or knows anybody working for the state government or even discovered anyone doing any work for the state government, you'll please excuse my next comment, but I thought being the motivational speaker for the state government workers was something somewhat akin to raising the dead. And I realize we are in a church sanctuary this evening, but it don't happen every day, if you know what I mean. Well, our Vice President, Kathy Harper, and I, we got on the plane, we flew out there, and I'm standing backstage in this huge arena, and it's my first speech after I'm blind. And I was trying to remember, now was it 12 steps or 13 to the front of that stage? Because that can be really critical at a certain point in time. And I was trying to remember, where were all those potted palm trees they put out there? You know, you guys travel a lot, you meet a lot of people. If you ever run into the man or woman, whoever it was, who decided they should go into arenas, convention centers, television studios, right where a blind guy might be working, and they decided to put potted palm trees all over the place, would you let them know I'd like to speak with them? Because over the last few years, I've had kind of a close personal relationship with some of those potted palm trees. Well, I'm standing backstage, and I'm really scared to death. And when you're blind, you become really aware of things around you. You pay really close attention. And standing backstage in that huge arena, I could tell, I could kind of sense that someone had come up and they were standing right next to me. You ever had somebody kind of standing in your space, you know what I mean? A little too close for comfort? Well, there was somebody, they were standing right there. I could just sense they were there, but they weren't making any noise. Now, folks, if we have a chance to meet later tonight after the program, or at some point in the future, you have got to make some noise. If you don't make noise, I won't like you. I may not like you anyway, but if you don't make some noise, we don't have a chance. Well, there's this person standing right here, and they're not making any noise. So I turned to Kathy, I said, look, I'm really nervous. I got to go out and raise these people from the dead, and I forgot where the potted palm trees are, and now I think there's somebody standing here. She said, Jim, I don't know how to tell you this, but there's a guy standing right next to you, and he's holding up a note in front of your face for you to read. I said, look, I really don't need this. I'm kind of having a panic attack here anyway. What does this guy's note say? Well, Kathy leaned over and read. I said, Jim, the note says, I am deaf. Can you help me find the front desk? So I turned to the deaf guy, and I said, no, sir, I'm blind. I can't help you find nothing. Got 14,000 people in the building. You got to ask me where the front desk is. I mean, a state government worker could probably help you with that. You'd need to get 4 or 5 of them together, kind of form a committee, but they could get that done. So I turned to Kathy and I said, what's he doing now? She said, he's holding the note closer. Well, folks, I explained it to him even louder, and we never did get together on that thing. And somewhere here in America, there is still a poor deaf man wandering around looking for the front desk, and if you run across him, I'd appreciate it if you would help him out. Well, that kind of ends the deep intellectual part of my remarks. I like to get the heavy lifting out of the way right up front. You know what I mean? Ladies and gentlemen, there are two, and really only two things I want to make very sure you know when you leave this place that you may or may not have known when you came in. And if you know these two things as you leave this room, I will have accomplished my mission in being here. What you do with them is quite simply your mission. And the first thing I want to make sure you know is that you have one and only one God-given right in this world, and that's the right to choose. And you are who you are and where you are in every area of your life because of the choices you've made in the past. Or if we were to put that another way, all the choices you've made in your life, all put together, have brought you to this place at this time, sitting in that chair right now. Now, as we travel around the world and tell millions of people, you are where you are because that's where you chose to be, a lot of people don't like that. Because we have become a society of people that loves to blame the other guy. We're not sure what happened, we're not sure what to do about it, we're not sure about anything, but we know it isn't our fault and we know who to blame. That's who we've become. But unless or until you and I accept the fact that we are where we are, because that's where we chose to be, we can't live today and every day of the rest of our lives in the certain knowledge that tomorrow will be anything we want it to be based on the choices we make right now. You have the right to choose. And anytime you don't like your life, just simply get up off your blessed assurance and change the channel. It's that simple. You picked it, you choose. And, you know, a lot of people don't believe that, but it's just that simple. And hey, I get it. You're talking to a blind guy. Bad things happen to good people. But for every person defeated by a situation, whether it's blindness or divorce or depression or unemployment or any other sickness, illness, whatever it may be, for every person defeated by that, I'll show you someone else with the same circumstance that used it as a springboard to get everything they ever wanted out of this life. You have the right to choose. I was traveling on a plane not long ago. It's the way I generally like to fly. I'm sorry. If you're a blind guy, you got to do that every once in a while. I just got to make sure you guys didn't leave. You know what I mean? I've given some of my best material to an empty arena. You know, just 9 guys out there sweeping up. Doesn't really bother me. I just like to know. So this particular day, I got on the plane, found my seat, stowed my carry-on luggage, got in my seat, got my seatbelt on. And for a blind guy, you're having a good day. A lot can go wrong in that process. I'll tell you about another day. And then this guy gets on and sits next to me. And as was mentioned earlier, I was an Olympic weightlifting champion. And I bring that up here because this guy sitting next to me, if they ever add a new event to the Olympics, I would call the marathon bad attitude, to see which individual on planet Earth has the worst attitude of any single person. He would have a gold medal too. I sat down and I stuck out my hand. I said, "Hi, I'm Jim Stovall." He mumbled something that I assume was his name, gave me kind of one of those wet fish handshakes, you know. And then he proceeded to say, "I hate this airline. I don't like my seat. I don't like the airport we're connecting through. I don't like our final destination. I don't like anything about this." In fact, I don't think he liked me, but we didn't get that far into the conversation. If you travel a lot, you know, there's only 2 kinds of flights. There's the conversation flight, and then there's the headset flight, pretty much determined by your seatmate. Well, I knew right off, now this here is going to be a headset flight. In fact, that day I invented a third category hereafter known as the high volume headset flight. I didn't even want any leakage from this guy, you know. Well, after a few minutes, we take off. The nice young lady, the flight attendant, comes down the aisle and says, "Gentlemen, we're going to be serving your dinner here in a few moments. Would you like the chicken or the beef?" I said, "Well, I believe I'd have the chicken this evening." And then she turns to my Olympic seatmate here and said, "Sir, would you like the chicken or the beef?" He said, "It doesn't matter." She said, "Well, sir, we have plenty of the chicken dinners and the beef on board. Which would you prefer?" He said, "It doesn't matter." And she said, well, sir, you are a first-class passenger here on our airline. It's my job to give you extraordinary service. So could I bring you the chicken or the beef? He said, it doesn't matter. Just get out of here and bring me something. You know, a real ray of sunshine, you know? One of those guys that can brighten up the whole room just by leaving. Well, after a few minutes, she comes back down the aisle, gives me my chicken dinner, and gives him the beef dinner. Now, for the next 41 minutes on this flight, I timed it according to the official Braille watch. For the next 41, I knew someday I'd be telling you this story. For the next 41 minutes, he told me everything you could imagine and some things you could not imagine that were wrong with the beef dinner and why he wished he had the chicken. Then it dawned on me. That's the way that most people live their lives. There's a few people that make the right decisions. They're the healthy, wealthy, happy, successful people that get whatever their concept of success is out of this life. There's a few people make the wrong decisions. They live in places like Leavenworth and San Quentin and McAllister. And then there's the vast majority of people you will ever meet who never make a decision at all. They spend more time planning their 3-day weekend than they do what are they going to do with the rest of their life. And if you don't get anything else out of our brief time together here this evening, I want you to realize this life we're living right now, this is not a practice game. This is the World Series and the Super Bowl and the Olympics all rolled up into one. And if you don't feel that kind of power and passion about what you do all day, every day, you either need to find something new to do or you need to find a new attitude. And tonight would not be too soon because you have the right to choose. The second thing I want to make sure you know before you leave this room is that you're sitting there right now in that chair simply one quality decision away from anything you want. Because you change your life when you change your mind. That is the most dynamic concept you'll ever encounter. Everything you'll ever do and know and have and create, your faith, your finance, your family, everything that will ever happen to you is based on the fact that you change your life when you change your mind. And it can happen that quickly. And you know, we all had dreams and goals and things we were going to. Remember when we were teenagers and young adults? Man, I'm going to be this, do this, have this. I'm going to change the world. I'm going to leave a legacy. I'm going to make a difference. And somewhere between there and here, we got so busy making a living that we forgot to create the life. Well, I came here tonight to tell you that the biggest dream you ever had in your life is alive and well. And the only thing you've got to do to reactivate that dream, you may not have thought about it in 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years. But the only thing you got to do to reactivate that big, scary dream is go into that little voting booth in the middle of your soul that only you and God know about. And you reach up and grab that lever that says yes. And vote for yourself. And once you vote for yourself, the only other person that's got to vote is God, and you'll find out He voted for you a long time ago. Now, you may not know how to do it, when to do it, where to do it, who to do it with, where to get the money. You may not know anything about it. Those are details. Those are what we call details. But the world belongs to the man or woman who will have that vision, vote yes, realize God is on your side, and move forward. And the provision will be provided. Give us this day our daily bread. He didn't give them bread for the whole journey. He gave them bread for the next day and the next day and the next day. You change your life when you change your mind. Some of you are going to do that today. Maybe just one. Maybe just one. I remember when I made that decision and changed my spiritual life. I'd grown up in the church, and I guess you would say I was religious. We went, and when the church was open, I was there, and I knew the words to all the songs and all the things. And it was just something I did every week, and we kind of checked the box and went on. And religion is fine until you have a crisis. And once you have a crisis, you better start to understand the difference between religion and relationship. I remember just before I was getting ready to go to college, and I had to get a physical exam, and it was taking a lot longer than normal, and the doctor shined a light in my eyes and called another doctor, and he came and shined his light in my eyes. And eventually, the third guy came in and ran several tests. And eventually the 3 doctors took me down a long hall and they sat me down at this table. And they said, Jim, we're not sure why, and we're not sure when, but we do know someday you're going to be totally blind and there's nothing we can do about it. There's nothing we can do about it. And your whole world just stops right there. Well, I could still see to get around in that fall. As you guys know, the state fair always comes to town. And I woke up that morning and I decided, while I can still see, I'm going to go to the state fair. I hadn't been in a lot of years. And I had a brief word with God there. I said, God, I'm angry. I'm frustrated. And I told him just what I thought about it. I told him, if you're God, you already know all this anyway, so I may as well say it. And I said, God, I am going to give you until sundown tonight to convince me there's something decent I can do with my life. Can you imagine the audacity? Tell Almighty God, okay, I got you on the clock here, God. You got about 12 hours here. Well, that was my plan, and I went off to the state fair, and there in the big IPE building, that's what they called it at the time, right there behind the Golden Driller, they had an exhibition from the previous Olympic Games. And they had the runners and all the boxers and all these people. They had the gymnasts, and to be real frank with you, I went over to look at those girls, those gymnasts. I thought, that's something a guy ought to see once. So I did. And as I was watching these girls do their thing, they brought out the weightlifters. And I watched those guys, and I thought, that's something a guy could do even if he was going blind right there. And 3 years later, I was a national champion, and I got to finish my athletic career on the Olympic team. And then I walked down the midway toward the pavilion, the big arena there, and they had a giant sign outside, said free concert. I had no idea who was playing, but free really fit my budget. So I went in, there was nobody there yet, so I wandered down, I sat on the front row. And I thought a little, I prayed a little, I cried a little, I thought about being blind and could a blind guy ever do anything? I thought about those weightlifters a little. And I reminded God, you got about 6 hours here. And I was so intent on my prayers and my depression and everything, I was unaware that the arena had filled up around me. Until I heard a voice I will never forget, said, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the Tulsa State Fair, the one, the only, the legend, Ray Charles. And they brought Ray out, and Ray was about 10 feet away from me. And Ray was magic. He lit it up. And I said, okay, God, I get it. A blind guy can do some stuff. I figured I better go do something else. Ray's kind of got this music thing covered pretty good. And that was the beginning of the climb that day. 10 years later, I had a successful business, and I was starting to speak and do these arena events. And I was in New York City speaking to 18,000 business leaders from around the world at Madison Square Garden. And I came off stage, and the promoter hugged me, and he said, man, that was exactly what we needed. I've got another group coming in next week, and can I hold you over and do another one? And I said, hey, you want to pay me again, we'll do it. Everybody don't get the free speech thing, you know. And he said, well, do you want to go back to Oklahoma, or do you want to stay in town? I said, hey, I've got some TV business to do in New York. I'll just stay here. And he said, well, since you're in town, I got another act opening here Tuesday night if you want to go. And I was trying to think of some polite way to tell this man that's paying me all this money that I'm not comfortable out in public. I'm barely comfortable on stage, but I'm not comfortable in public in New York City and to go to a concert. But I was trying to be polite. And I said, who do you got coming? He said, Ray Charles, Tuesday night, Carnegie Hall. I said, yeah, I'll go to that. I said, you got anything on the front row? He said, I do. You can sit on the front row. Well, they brought Ray out again, and there he was still magic. And after the show, the promoter said, just sit here for a minute, and I'll take you backstage, and you can hang out with Ray. Well, we went backstage, and he was meeting and greeting people, and the promoter said, just give him a minute, he's got to sign a few more autographs. Well, I had been blind almost 10 years by then, and I didn't know blind people could write. I didn't. I've been blind 10 years. I had no idea you could write. So I said, well, how does he write? And Ray heard me and said, who said that? I said, well, sir, my name's Jim Stovall. I'm blind too. And I didn't know blind people could write. And he said, son, if anybody in your life ever thinks enough of you to want your autograph, the least you can do is learn how to write your name. Kind of ticked me off, actually. And I said, well, old man, you're going to have to show me. He said, sit yourself down right here. And he took my hand and showed me how he traced out Ray Charles, and then he showed me how to trace out Jim Stovall. It was another 10 years before I could write anything other than Jim Stovall and Ray Charles. That's all I knew how to write. And that was the beginning of a relationship that lasted as long as his life. He did his third to last concert here in Tulsa at our Performing Arts Center. And I went and we sat backstage, and he and I both knew he didn't have long. And he says, Jim, you think when we die and go to heaven we'll be able to see? I said, yes, sir, I do. He said, what do you think those angels look like? I said, I don't know, Ray. He said, well, they always show up when you need them, and they help you and they inspire you. I said, well, as far as I'm concerned, then they look like Ray Charles. Because he was. And I said, Ray, how do you want people to remember you? And he said, when I die, all I want is for the word blind not to be in the first sentence of my obituary. And it was about 2.5 months later, my assistant Kelly Morrison came into my office and said, Jim, we just got word Ray died. And I said, pull down USA Today, pull down Wall Street Journal, pull down the New York Times, and bring me the obits. And they said Ray Charles was an icon. He was a musical genius. He was an inspiration for generations. Ray changed the face of music. And you had to get all the way to the third paragraph before it said he was blind. And I said, Ray made it. Because you and I, we all have problems, we all have challenges, we all have those things to deal with. But by the grace of God, I refuse to be known and labeled by my problem. I prefer to be labeled by his promise and the potential he's given me. And that's the right and the privilege that you and I both have in this world. For the last 25 years, I have been all around the world on these torturous things they politely call a book tour. Now, if you haven't made this mistake in your life, don't ever write a book. See, you think you did all the work when you write the book, but they send you out on this tour and they try to kill you is what they try to do. And see, I have figured these publishers out. They have more people that want to write books than they have slots for authors. So they send you out on the book tour and they hope you never come back. And a lot of authors don't. They're just permanently lost out there in book tour land. And the way it works, you fly to some city you've never been to before and you never want to go to again. And a little guy picks you up, and he takes you and you do 5 radio interviews, 2 TV interviews, a book signing, a speech, and you get back on a plane, and the next guy picks you up in the next city, and you do this day after day after day. And after a while, you don't even know where you are. And you're on all of these programs. I've done them all, like Good Morning Buffalo, Wake Up Cleveland, Go to Bed Omaha. I have been on all these shows. And one of the things you find out fairly quickly is there's only about 7 questions anybody in the media ever asked you. In fact, I don't know what people do for 4 years in journalism school. See, I think the way when you show up the first day, they give you the sheet with the 7 questions, and they tell you, no matter what, ask everybody that right there. And then they work the rest of the time on makeup and blow dry. That's kind of how that works there in the media. So we got the state government workers in the meeting. I like to have a balanced program, you know. Well, one question I'm asked more than any other is, Jim, out of all the people you've met, you worked with, the movie stars, the athletes, the politicians, the millionaires and the billionaires, who has changed your life the most? And I thought a lot about that. And there is one guy that's changed my life, probably more than anyone else. And I want to introduce you to him as I begin to close my remarks this evening. After my experience with Ray Charles, I didn't know what I was going to do, but I had grown up around ORU. My father worked there for 57 years. And as a young man, I swore there's one place on the planet I will never go to school. That's ORU. God is endowed with an incredible sense of humor. And the minute you say, I will never do that, you just need to start packing a bag right then. Well, I ended up that fall at ORU. And near there was a school for blind kids. And I could still see to a certain extent. So I don't know what I was doing. I don't know whether I was trying to make a deal with God or help out or learn more about it. I don't know what motivated me. But I went over to this school for blind kids, and I met with the principal. And I said, look, I have no background, no training, no experience in working with blind children, and I'd like to teach here. Well, you can imagine how excited they were to see me. Oh yeah, let's get this guy on the faculty immediately. But she was very kind. She said, Jim, if you really want to do this, we do have one kid you could kind of work with one-on-one. And I said, well, I was kind of thinking of having my own class, actually. And she said, Jim, you either work with the kid or you get out of here. Folks, I have found over the years, when you don't have any choice, it's not that hard to make a decision. Would you like A or A? So I said, okay, I'll work with the kid. What do I teach this kid? And she said, Jim, that's just it. Christopher is 4 years old. He's totally blind. He has a lot of other physical problems. And we have determined that he's never going to grow or learn or advance or develop any more than he already has. So all we want you to do, Jim, is keep him quiet and keep him away from the other kids, because Christopher's not going any further. Ladies and gentlemen, don't you dare ever forget that we always live up to the expectations that we have of ourselves, or those expectations that we allow other people to place upon us. Well, they had no expectations for Christopher, and the only training they gave me to work with this poor kid was two things. They said, Jim, he doesn't know how to tie his shoes, so keep his shoes tied or he'll trip on a shoelace and fall, and keep him away from the stairs. It's very hard for blind people to climb up and down the stairs, and we're afraid he's going to fall down the staircase and be injured. Other than that, Jim, we don't care what you do. Just keep him quiet, keep him out of the way so the other kids can learn. Well, that first day I went out to meet Christopher, he was very, very small, much smaller than you would expect a 4-year-old child to be. And he was indeed totally blind, and he had a lot of other physical problems. And that first day, we sat down and we had a serious conversation. And I said, young man, before I leave here, no matter how many weeks or months or years it takes, you are at least going to learn how to tie your shoes and climb the stairs. And he said, no, I can't. And I said, yes, you can. And he said, no, I can't. And I said, yes, you can. And he said, no, I can't. And if you've ever spent any time with a 4-year-old, you know, they can do this all day long. I had never experienced anything quite like that. Just wear you right down. Well, we began working every day. We were learning how to tie our shoes and climb the stairs. Meanwhile, I was attending the university. They had never had a student with a disability. They weren't ready for me, and I certainly wasn't ready for them. So I prepared to do the only thing I knew how to do, which was drop out. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know your name. I hope to meet you later this evening. I don't know your name. I don't know your dreams, your goals. I don't know the challenges and the barriers that you face in your life. But there's one thing I know about you better than you know about yourself, and that is quite simply this. When it comes to that big dream, that maximum calling, the reason you were put here by God on this planet at this time, it's always too soon to quit. You think you've tried everything, you think you've thought over everything, you're not even close. And I hope God will allow enough obstacles and barriers to come into your world so you'll find out what a giant of a human being you were created to be. But I didn't know any of that, so I prepared to drop out of school. I went over to the school for blind kids. I got there early, and I went in to meet with the principal again, and I said, look, now I'm going blind myself. I can't come here and work with Christopher anymore. This will have to be my last day. Well, I didn't know they dropped the kid off early that day. Out of the years we worked together, that one day, they dropped him off early. And he was standing outside the open door to the principal's office hearing this whole conversation. So as I went out to tell him goodbye and tell him I loved him and tell him I hope someday somebody else will show up and spend some time with you, he turns to me and said, yes, you can. I said, no, I can't. And he said, yes, you can. And I said, no, I can't. And he said, yes, you can. And as I was preparing to explain to this ignorant, uninitiated, somewhat precocious, and obnoxious 4-year-old child, hey, kid, this is different. This is like going to a major university. This is not tying your shoes. It hit me like a ton of bricks. Stovall, either get up and do something with your life or quit lying to the kid. Because if it works for tying your shoes and climbing the stairs and finishing college and creating lives and ministries and opportunities and legacies that are worthy of you and worthy of your best efforts. And if it doesn't work, let's quit lying to the kids. 3 years later, I graduated from the university with 2 degrees and honors. And that same week, I had the privilege of my life, with what little vision I had left. In fact, one of the last things I ever really remember seeing was then 7-year-old Christopher climb up 3 flights of stairs, turn and sit on the top step, and tie both of his shoes. And that's the person that's impacted my life the most. It's not the millionaires and the billionaires and the movie stars and the athletes and the politicians. It's a 4-year-old child that came into my life for 3 years to teach me the unadulterated wisdom of the ages, which is quite simply, when it comes to that big dream inside of you, it's always too soon to quit. There's no place in the scriptures where God ever called anybody to do anything that he didn't give the provision they needed to get from here to there. About 6 weeks after that miraculous day when Christopher climbed the stairs and tied his shoes, Christopher died of a brain tumor, which was the condition that had caused him to lose his sight in the first place. And as I was attending his funeral, one of the other teachers said, you know, isn't it a shame we'll never know what he could have done had he been given a full life? I said, wait a minute, hold the phone. The kid has made his contribution because anything I do from this day forward, I owe to him. And they tell me I have now shared that story with over 4 million people live, just like you and I are talking right now. And many of them have done what a few of you are going to do, which is use Christopher's example as a platform to examine your life, your goals, your ambitions, the calling for your life, exercise your right to choose, make a quality decision, and forevermore change your life by changing your mind. The person that's going to get out of your chair in just a couple of minutes will be totally different than the person that sat down. 20 years from now, you'll remember tonight. You won't remember me or anything I said, but you'll remember that's the night I said yes to the big dream. And the world changes when you say yes. Because when Christopher died, it was like he had a will. He left me a few things, and I'm going to leave them with you as I close. Christopher left me with the certain knowledge that there's no such thing as an insignificant person. If there had ever been an insignificant person, it would have been Christopher. His whole biography would read, lived to be 7 years old, learned how to tie his shoes and climb the stairs. That was everything he had to recommend him, but he has changed the lives of countless people around the world. Christopher left me with the certain knowledge there's no such thing as an insignificant relationship. They're all critical, they're all important. When you understand that interconnectivity, the way we're all put together in this life, you'll understand that you don't have the right for one day or even one moment to be anything less than the best you can be, and you'll understand that mediocrity is the most selfish pursuit of any human being. You know, there are people in your world, your friends, your colleagues, your family, some of them, they're at the end of their road. They're hurting. And in the final analysis, they won't do what I talk about or write about or even make movies about. They'll do what you do. So you can never be anything less than your best. Christopher left me with a certain knowledge there's no such thing as an insignificant day. Every day's a gift, every day's a joy. You take it from a guy who thought he would spend the rest of his days, including this one, in a 9 by 12-foot room. And finally, my friends here at Asbury, Christopher left me with a certain knowledge there's no such thing as an insignificant moment, because every moment of every day of the rest of your life holds within it your key to greatness, which is your ability to sit right there, exercise your right to choose, make a quality decision, and forevermore change your life by changing your mind. If not now, when? And if not you, who? Don't miss this opportunity. As the pastor said, my publisher and I have donated some books to our scholarship. They're in the back. I think we got 3 titles here tonight. My very first book, You Don't Have to Be Blind to See. It's got the Christopher story and some other things we talked about tonight and some things we didn't have time to talk about, but it's back there. My book, Today's the Day, which is my syndicated column and a compilation of around 100 of them, I think, short pieces that anybody can read quickly. And my book, Sound of Honor, which is the first in a detective series I write. They're mysteries with a message. They're fun, but you learn a lot and you become a better person. It's about a blind guy that lives here in Tulsa, Oklahoma, big stretch. And he runs around with this beautiful woman and this ancient British limo driver. And together they solve all these mysteries and things. And those will be back there, and if you'd like me to, I'd be happy to sign those for you. The great thing about my signature, you can't read it anyway. So you can make stuff up. Say, look, the president signed that, or Mark Wacken, who signed that. You know, if he could write, he would have signed that. And if you ask a special request, I might even sign a few Ray Charleses tonight. But we'll be back there for a little while, and every penny of the sales all go to the Crusader Scholarship Fund, which I'm very proud of. And I want to thank you and Pastor Harrison and everybody for the opportunity to be here, because I remember sitting in that little 9 by 12-foot room on an evening much like this, just a few miles from here, and sitting there alone in the dark, depressed, discouraged, probably suicidal. Sitting there, the most magnificent thing I could have thought about, the most tremendous idea I could capture, the most amazing concept I could conceive was not as special to me as getting to spend this evening with you. And as always, I'll leave you with this. Hold on to your dreams and stand tall even when those around you would force you to crawl. Hold on to your dreams as a race you must run, even when reality whispers you'll never be done. And finally, my friends, hold on to your dreams and wait for the miracle to come. Because on that miraculous day, your dreams and your reality will merge into one. I love you more than I can say. See you next time. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. We are out of here. Thank you, guys.
So we have the opportunity to live however we want. We get the power of choice of all the things God gave us, the ability to choose who we are, who we want to be, how we want to live. And so we have a wonderful example before us, inspiring. We all have stuff. We all carry things. We all have problems and difficulties. And so we can also see that in the midst of them, that God can redeem all of these problems and work it for good. As Joseph told his sibling rivalry brothers, what you meant for evil, God meant for good. And we're people who believe that. And so as you go through life, you're going to have struggles and heartache and heartbreak and pain. But remember that God is going to work things for good as we love Him and trust Him. Would you stand as I give the benediction? Again, remind you of your opportunity to head over to the CLC, and whatever we're going to keep a good total on this, and whatever you all give in this direction, Asbury will match. Daniel Dennison will find the money to do that. So God, we thank you for the opportunity to hear this story of this man and how you've redeemed his life and how we yearn for that in our own. We remember that grace truly is amazing. I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see. And so as we go from this place, renew our hearts and help us that we might be those people living as you have intended for us to live. So bless us as we go our way. We give you thanks. We ask your blessing, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Good night. Thank you for coming.